everyone, I'm Lara.
I'm Spencer, and we're married with board games. Pie is great for all sorts of reasons. To eat, to smell, and for analogies. For example, board games are like pies. There's an outer covering that hides a delicious smelling filling inside.
Except your analogy falls apart when it comes to eating the pie.
Well, you see, technically, what you do is...
So in this review, we are going to dig into Pie Town, a 2 to 4 player dice worker placement game from Renegade Games.
But does it taste as delicious as it smells? Okay, I can't do this. Let's head over to the table for a quick overview before we get to our thoughts. And here we are. You have now arrived at Pie Town. Here are all of the components. This is just an overhead view of everything that you get. I just wanted to show you everything, and then I'll go component by component. But first, you got 3 main boards. You got the market board, the orchard, and the scoreboard. Scoreboard is where we'll be keeping track of the rounds and your score. Orchard, you can go get some ingredients for your pies. And the market, of course, is where you can go sell your pies. Each player also has their own store board, so this represents each area inside your pie store. And then here are your individual character components. First off, you'll decide which character you want to be. You can do that by color. You can do that by what their pies look like. You can do that by what they look like. It's your choice. So you'll take their card, their matching components, their pies, their score marker, which you use on the score track, their specific markers for their store boards, and then their matching dice. You'll also take a recipe box to put your secret recipe inside. Each of these dice have numbers on it, like most dice do, and then each number has a different symbol on it, just so, you know, kind of change things up, all the way up to the 6, which has a chef's hat. At the beginning of the game, you're going to be coming up with your secret recipe. So what you'll do is you'll take the ingredient bag, and you're going to reach in there secretly and decide what your secret recipe is going to be. It's got to be made up of 2 common ingredients, which the common ingredients are the apples, so different colors of apples, and you do 1 rare ingredient. So in this case, I think I'm going to go with the 2 apples and 1 banana. You keep that secret. You put it inside your secret recipe box. You can check it at any time in case you forget, but you definitely want to keep that secret from your opponents. On the back of your character card, there's also a way you can take notes. If you're trying to deduce what your opponent, what their secret recipe is, you can take the little dry erase marker and write their name, and then you can, you know, cross off, no, it's not a red apple, or I'm pretty sure it's the strawberry. So you can use that to take notes. And again, it's dry erase. You just wipe it off with a tissue at the end of the game. You start off with 2 workers, so the dice represent your workers. One's at a level 2, and one is at a level 3. Now these levels are very important based on what you are doing. You also place a lockdown on this extra oven, this apple that tells you how many ingredients you can keep in your storage. And for now, the chef's hat starts at 1. That's how many points I get for each pie I bake. I'll walk you through the different actions you can do on your player board here. A basic round for the game is pretty straightforward. Everybody will use their dice to take the actions, and you take turns. So I'll place a die, the next player will place a die, and then everybody goes around until they've placed all their dice, and then you'll recall them, and then you'll go on to the next round and do that for 9 rounds until the game is over. Then you have a final bake-off, and I'll explain that to you here in just a second. But first, let's talk about the different things you can do on your turn. You can send a worker to hire. However, if you notice here, there's a -2. That means in order to do this action, you're going to lose 2 points on your die. So you have to be at least a 3, because obviously you can't get down to a 0 on a die. You have to be at least a 3 in order to gain a worker. So what you can do is you can take one of your other ones. This tells you that it starts at a 1. And then for the next round, I'm going to have an additional worker to be able to use to do other actions. If I have enough ingredients, I can go bake. Right here, this right here says you bake number of pies and score victory points. So because my die is at a 2, I'm going to bake 2 pies if I have the necessary ingredients. And I will score victory points from what I have here in the kitchen, which is 1 point per pie. Another action you can do is upgrade. You can expand your storage here, so instead of only holding 8 ingredients, you can now hold 14. Or you can open up another oven so that you can send 2 workers to bake instead of only 1. That about covers everything that you can do there in your pie store. Let's go take a look at what else you can do around the town. If you want to send your worker to get some ingredients for your pies, you send them and place them at one of the available squares. Now over here, the reason why there aren't any ingredients in the orchard is because this is for a 3-player game, you would fill that up. And then for a 4-player game, you would fill this one up too. But you go, and then depending on what number your dice is on, you can take that many ingredients. So since this die is on a 3, I can take 3 ingredients from any of the adjacent trees. So I'm going to take 1 yellow apple, 1 pumpkin, and I'm going to take this banana. And then you place those in your storage on your pie shop. Whenever you do the bake a pie action, you go and place it over here in the market. Now, you can bake several different types of pies whenever you do that action. If you do 3 common ingredients, you're making essentially a common pie. If you do 2 common and 1 rare, you're making that kind. You can do 1 apple and 2 rare, and then finally you can bake your secret recipe. Once you bake the pie, you'll place it in whichever column it corresponds to. You put it on the topmost available space. In a 3-player game, you can go up to here. In a 4-player game, you can stack pies all the way up there. Also, when you bake pies, you have to reveal the ingredients that you use. Now, you don't have to say, I'm dedicating these 3 ingredients to this pie, but if you're going to bake one of your secret recipes, you at least need to bake more than 1 pie at a time, so that you can say, here's all the ingredients I'm using, but I'm not going to show you which ingredients go to which pie. But anyway, when you bake pies, they go here. At the market, you can also send one of your workers to sell your pies. So if you go over here, you would sell all pies in 1 column. So you can choose any column and you'll sell all the pies. Whoever's pies are in that column that you choose will get a number of points based on the amount of pies they have. So for example, if you've got a pie in here, you get 7 points for each pie in that column when it's sold. You can also go over here to sell the bottom row. So instead of selling the column, you can instead sell the row. Again, you get the same amount of points based on which type of pie you've made. You will also gain the number of victory points that's on your die. So I would gain 4 points in this scenario. And then I can draw 2 ingredients from the Pie Town bag at random. Finally, let's take a look at the pie convention board. Again, here's where you're keeping track of your points. You do that by moving your pie along there. It's also where you keep track of rounds. You do that with this tiny, adorable little rolling pin here. But yeah, you move that along here. Actions that you can take here are, if you put your worker there, you can assign a new starting player, which this is the starting player token. Normally it's passed at the end of the round, but if you want to, let's say, take it for yourself, if it's going to be someone else's turn, you can do that. Or you can change one of the ingredients of your secret recipe. If someone's discovered what your recipe is, you can then choose to change one of those ingredients. Now you'll notice that some of the actions have +1 or -1. What that means is whenever you recall your workers at the end of each round, you're going to manipulate your die based on what you've done. So if I had assigned a starting player, my die will start the next round at a 5. Where is the 5? There it is. At a 5. But if I did instead decided to change an ingredient in my secret recipe, I lose a point. So from a 4, I would go down to a 3, and now I can do fewer things and less powerful actions on my turn. So there are consequences to doing some actions. Now you've heard me make mention of the secret recipe several times. So yeah, the secret recipe pies are worth more points. Now you not only can bake your own secret recipe, but if you figure out one of your opponent's secret recipes, you can choose to make their secret recipe and you would get the 7 points too. What you would do is say to that opponent secretly, here's what I think your secret recipe is, and they would say yes, essentially, and then you can play it and make a 7-point pie. Another action you can do is spy. So if I'm out here in the orchard and someone comes along with a higher value die, they can place it on top of mine and spy and look at my secret recipe. What they do is they take the difference in the numbers, so example from a 5 to a 3, that's a 2, and they can see 2 ingredients from my secret recipe. I have to pull those at random and show them to them without me looking at them, and now they know most of my secret recipe. If another player had a 6, they could come along and spy on top of that person and reveal one of their ingredients to them. So there's some spying, there's some lying, and there are some apple pies. The final event of the game after you play through 9 rounds is called the final bake-off. Here you have one last chance to guess your opponent's secret recipes. In the rule book, it shows you what happens when you guess. Now, it's optional. You don't have to guess everybody. You can guess one player, you can guess some, you can guess 0. But here, if you guess, you don't get any of the 3 ingredients right, you get -2 points. If you don't guess, you don't get any points, but you lose points if you get all 3 wrong. If you get 1 out of 3 correct, it's 0 points. If you get 2 out of 3, it's 2, and maximum, if you get 3 out of 3, you get 4 points. So essentially, if you're playing a 4-player game and you guessed all 3 of your opponent's recipes, you end up with 12 extra points at the end of the game. And that's a pretty high-level overview of Pie Town, just to give you some context for our thoughts.
Pie Town! You got a look around Pie Town?
When I heard of Pie Town, I picture like buildings made out of pies.
Really?
Yeah, you got like a big old Astrodome type thing, but it's in the shape of a pie. And you go and you play like pie-themed sports like the pie toss.
See, all I could think about is, I guess I've been watching too much Riverdale, like a town named after pie, and like
You've been
like their school mascot.
You've been watching too much Riverdale.
And they're all just clean-cut kids.
But speaking of Riverdale, we're here to talk about Pie Town.
Right.
Okay, so let's get started on this thing.
Yes.
What do you think of this presentation, the artwork?
You know what's funny? I think it's pretty deceiving.
Oh, Spies, Lies, and Apple Pies? Is that part of the tagline?
See how small that is? Yeah. That's a good indicator of what this game is. But when you look at it and you hear Pie Town, and you see these happy little pie bakers on here, you think it's going to be something different, but it's funny.
Basically, you think it's kind of a kid-friendly game.
Oh, definitely. And then it's advertised as ages 14 and up.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but
Not
you
at
definitely.
all. I think that adds. I mean that's part of the game.
Yeah.
Is this light, airy thing on the outside, and then on the inside there's a dark
Deception.
world underneath, in pie baking.
Competitive pie baking.
Competitive pie baking. Right.
But because of that, it's a fun theme. It really is.
It really is. There's
unique.
so many ways that this could have gone, and the fact that they picked pies.
Yeah.
Good on you, Renegade
Well,
Games.
it's unique. There's not a whole lot of games about pies. I did some research. There are games about pies, but not a whole lot. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's an inviting theme too.
Oh,
I mean, who doesn't like
incredibly.
pie except for you?
That is not true. I like pies.
You just don't like fruit pies, right?
Do you count pumpkin as a fruit?
No, I don't.
It's a gourd, isn't it?
Yeah, it's its own thing.
Like David
pumpkins, yes.
Pumpkin.
So yes, this is an inviting theme. I feel like anybody can be drawn to this, especially because even if you don't like pie, what is this Pie Town? Tell me more about it. Mm-hmm. So that's really cool, and I feel like I think it's executed very well in the game too. I feel like I'm running a pie bakery and selling it and trying to make better pies than you.
And competing.
Yes.
Trying to find out your secret recipe.
This is my secret recipe. And spying on you. It's
we'll get
really
into
fun.
that in a minute, though.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but no, it's not a children's game.
Right, but it's an inviting game.
Yes.
Definitely.
And like with many Renegade products, it's a good production.
Yes, they do an excellent job.
I will say though, that some of those components are really small. Those little pie pieces are tiny.
Well, that's for the score track.
I know, but then you got the
rolling pin.
Little tiny rolling pin.
The rolling pin is the tiniest thing.
Yep.
Like I think it's smaller than the wishbone in operation.
Yeah.
Right?
Probably. The little cardboard pieces that you use to put on your bakery, that you put to
for
the
like
locks and the
right, denoting how many points you're going to get for a pie and
those are small.
How many ovens. Yeah.
And then the pads that you use to take notes on. There's not a whole lot of room there to take your notes on what.
There's not. You're right.
So if you really wanted to take in-depth notes on what your opponent's doing with their recipe ingredients, then you'll have to break out the steno. Mm-hmm. And write down your notes.
You got a kid in your briefs.
But it is a good production, just slightly small. Mm-hmm. Now I think that the addition of those recipe boxes is really cool. I think it's cute.
I think it's a very cute idea because it is the way it's built. It is like a pie box.
Yeah.
That you would buy a pie from a bakery. The thing is, partly because You and I don't always have the best memory. Or some opponents might spy a whole lot, and you're having to open and close, open and close, open and close those boxes. I'm really worried that they're going to tear.
Yeah, so we don't have anything to back that up as far as, we just haven't had the game that long to explore that. But just keep that in mind. Be careful, as with most games. Be careful with...
As with pie.
As with pie. Be careful with your components. Treat them nicely. And, yeah, be leery, one of those words about that. Okay, so...
Handle with care.
So, ages 14 and up. This game I don't feel like is that difficult to teach.
I don't think it's difficult to teach, especially if... what I find might be a little off-putting to some people is the deduction element.
Okay.
But it's not totally that integral.
Right.
Gameplay.
Right.
You are collecting ingredients, and you are baking pies, how you get points, and selling pies at the fair, or the pie fair. That's how you get points.
Pie market, yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. And I like to hold that thought for just a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, you can put it down so you're not distracting people. But, so yeah, you got that deduction element that some people might not be good at. But as far as the game overall, it's a pretty straightforward worker placement game. You do have that dice manipulation, which is an added thing to think about. But as far as explaining the game, like my sister's never played a worker placement game before. And we played this with her. And she plays very, very entry-level games. And she picked this one up real quick. I
think what's helpful with that, though, is the element of it being dice. And the way that the dice are implemented in this game.
Yeah.
Sometimes dice worker placement, you roll the dice, and that's what you get to use the dice for.
Yeah.
In this game, you are set at the beginning of one worker is a 2 and one worker is a 3. And whichever task that you set them at, the number tells you how much of that thing they get to do, whether it's picking ingredients or baking pies or hiring a new employee or whatnot. The number tells you how much you get to do. Yeah. And I think that's instrumental and a good way to start out entry-level gamers.
It's very visual too, to see how powerful this particular employee is, how much worth they are, and essentially, ooh, I've got a 6, I can do a lot with this one. Ooh, my 1 is not going to be very instrumental in my pie baking.
Well, and on top of that, with your 1, you can get spied on very easily.
Yes, yeah. But, as far as, it's being a very straightforward worker placement game with a little of those tweaks to it, I think it's a good introduction to the mechanism.
Exactly.
Put it here, do that with the value that's on your die.
Yes.
So it's a great introduction not only to worker placement, but dice placement, whatever term you want to use. So I think it's very entry-level friendly.
And yes, and because of that, this is a great game to introduce to your family or to new gamers. I think that's a great idea.
And it's very straightforward because I think that's one of the things about worker placement games that's great for entry-level people. It's like you assign this person to this task and you do it. It's like I'm going to send, it's like in real life.
And no one else can go there.
Right, exactly. So it's very helpful and like you said, great for families and entry-level gamers. So where's that thought that you have about deduction?
It's right here.
There it is. Okay, here, let's take it out.
All right, let's unpack it.
So with it being just that entry-level worker placement, it could get stale, I think. But with the addition of that deduction, I think that's a nice touch.
Definitely. So we talked about you've got your secret pie or your secret recipe. And opponents might see you picking certain ingredients, or when you bake your pies and you lay out your ingredients that you're baking with, they're looking there, and if you include, and I'm baking a secret recipe pie, they're trying to decide what your secret recipe is, because secret recipe pies,
they're worth the most points.
They are worth the most points.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like I said about being spied on as a worker or whatnot, opponents can spy on you either at the pie market or pie fair or at the orchard. An opponent can place a die on top of your worker, and if the number is higher, that number has to be higher basically, whatever the difference is, the opponent gets to look at that many of your secret ingredients, and you as the person who's being spied on, you don't know what ingredients they're looking at. That's the trickiest part, and I'm glad they added that in. I think that adds even more to it.
Definitely.
You don't get to choose what ingredients they look at. You don't know what they looked at, because you do have that option. One of your things to basically take up a worker action is to go change one of your ingredients. Then you're left wondering, which one do I change? Because I don't know what they saw.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating. But on top of that, that's something that can be derailing your opponent. You can be baking your secret recipes. You can be baking your opponent's secret recipes. So then they need to go change their secret recipe ingredients. That's taking up another turn that they could have been baking or selling.
Yeah, for sure. So if you really nail that deduction, if you're really good at it, then feasibly you can take the lead really quick because you're able to bake those pies at a really high level of points that you're going to be getting for those.
And especially keeping your opponents from baking them.
However, if nobody in the game is really good at that, you could
basically just make it a pie race. And just make as many pies as you can.
It's not too much of an ingrained thing that if you're not good at it, it's not going to ruin the game for you.
Because it's still a thing on the board of there's a limit to how many pies can be out there before they have to be sold. And I think that can be another thing that if you're just going for filling that up as quickly as you can and not letting anybody else get their pies on there, I think that's another great strategy.
Right. So at the end of the game, you have the opportunity again to guess all of your opponent's secret recipes.
Yes.
And, you know, if you go all in and say, these are the ones, you don't get any right, you lose points. And then, of course, it's scaled depending on how many you get correct. But you don't have to do it. It's optional.
But if you get them correct, how many points do you get?
Well, maximum you get is 4 points.
4.
And,
I feel like
you know,
it should be bigger.
Well, and think about this. So if you're playing as full player count, four people, how feasible is it for you to nail all 3 recipes? It'd be very difficult to do that. If you can, think about it this way. You're going to get 12 points. So that could be a huge determining factor in the end game, but I don't feel like that's very, very possible for a person to do. And so because, like what you're saying, those 4 points aren't going to have that much of an effect. So I almost don't feel like, the stakes are high enough for nailing those secret recipes at the end, especially to dedicate a whole lot of brain power and your actions like spying to figure those out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
One other thing we'd like to talk about is through your turns at the end of each round, you have to clear that tree of everything, even if there's remaining ingredients on those orchards.
Which more than likely in a 2-player game there are going to be plenty of ingredients left out there.
It's kind of fiddly to do that every round, to dump them all in the bag and then put new ones out.
I will say I understand why it's done, just to make sure that you're getting a good circulation of ingredients out there, but at the same time, yes,
it's annoying.
It is fiddly.
I feel like it really interrupts the flow of the game. You have to wait.
Right, we get all this all set up and we get our workers back, and if they did these certain actions, they get to increase in value and whatnot. We get that all set, and then we look at the orchard board and go, oh yeah. Dump those out and then redistribute new ingredients.
Yeah, so that's... Again, I don't...
It's necessary.
It's necessary, but
at the same time, bleh.
And speaking of bleh, I felt like playing just at 2 players was kind of bleh.
I agree.
It was just kind of dull. I don't feel like the ingredients on the orchard...
There wasn't a competition for ingredients.
No, so it wasn't... you know, there wasn't any kind of a scarcity element to it. So you basically had what you wanted. You still could pay attention to what your opponent's getting, but... You know, in a higher player count, you do have to worry about your opponents getting the ingredients that you want.
Well, and in a higher player count, I felt like pies were getting sold more often.
Yeah.
And in a 2-player game, they weren't. And then we were just kind of sitting there waiting out who's going to sell them and who's going to start baking again.
Exactly. You have fewer players to go do that action and clear that out. So it's basically left up to yourself or the other. So definitely don't recommend this at 2-player. At least 3 and 4, shines at 4, but not a 2-player game. And one final negative, I don't know if you want to say it's a negative, it's not a negative, it's just a taste thing. It's just not, I don't see this being a game for strategic gamers.
Right.
We mentioned at the beginning of the review, towards the beginning, that it is very straightforward worker placement with that added deduction to it. I feel like it gets stale maybe after a couple of plays.
Well, and especially like you said, since the deduction isn't that that big of an advantage over your fellow players, then yeah.
But having said all of that, Pie Town is a great introduction to dice worker placement games and would be perfect for families and newer gamers. After our multiple trips to Pie Town, we've concluded that it's an all-around fun game. It's going to be appealing to many people based on the theme, and we think its best audience is families and people new to the hobby.
We don't think more strategic gamers will be satisfied after a few plays, though. There's just not quite enough meat to it. Although the deduction is a nice touch.
That being said, we give Pie Town a rating of 7 and a seal of approval. Families will love this one and are sure to get a hankering for pie while playing.
We're going to box this one up for now. We have a hankering to tell you about our website, where you can find more reviews, our blog, and podcast. Just head over to marriedwithbg.com.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.